Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3714. Today's date is November 20, 2025. It's been almost like a night at 9:24 p.m. All right, let's just jump into the question. Let's go. Okay, the question is, what if competition is fostered global collaboration? Okay, it's very little bit hard to understand question, but it's not really that hard. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. And when I try to think about that reality, or when I try to create that reality, it kind of like a really required my knowledge and experience to kind of like a create this reality. Now, what if question is kind of like a something very different. It's not a kind of like a something answer that kind of like a something stagnant for in like everybody, like a 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. No, it's not really that. It's kind of like a what if question. A what if question means like that ki answer is kind of like a bit really subjective. It's rely on person. It rely on kind of like a person's knowledge and information and experience that he been through. And that's why kind of like a what if question is kind of like a really interested way to kind of like give the answer. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It is just my opinion. It's raw, it's unfiltered, it is just my opinion, and opinion are subjective. Alright, so let's proceed. Alright, yeah. Now, the question is, what if the competition is fostered global collaboration? Now, this question is kind of like a somewhat something very much difficult to understand because of some of the kind of like words are not really understandable. I'm actually from India, and some of the kind of like some English are bit more kind of like a some bit more English. Okay, yeah, like a fostered and kind of like a some a competition and global collaboration things. Okay, let's just simplify this question. But instead of kind of like simplifying this question, I'm kind of like simplify this kind of like with the example. Okay, yeah. Imagine a scenario, okay, yeah, that Russia and US are like basically. Let me give you the history. Okay, yeah. Let's talk about the history first. In Cold War, US are wanted to kind of like a simply US and Russia have a kind of like a space race. Okay, yeah. A space race means like that which country will kind of like a dominate the space. Okay, yeah. Russia kind of like a simply send first satellite to the kind of like a simply atmosphere, Earth atmosphere. Okay, Earth space. Okay, Earth space. Sorry, Sputnik 1. Alright, yeah. Then Russia is also kind of like a simply send first human to the space, Yuri Gagarin. Okay, yeah. So basically, Russia is kind of like a little bit ahead. Now, US doesn't really want backward. He wants to go ahead. Okay, yeah. So he kind of like somebody take his step even more further. He kind of like somebody challenge that he will the US will kind of like simply land, the human will kind of like land to the moon and they will come back. Okay, yeah. Like this kind of like a challenge that US took. And for this particular challenge, US kind of like put all the effort. They put all the effort, energy, money, everything to kind of like achieve that thing. And they also achieve that thing. Okay, yeah. Neil Armstrong, and these are kind of like somebody Buzz Aldrin. These are kind of like the first human who kind of like somebody step foot on the moon, became the first human. Okay, yeah. So which is kind of like something really amazing. Okay, yeah. Now, because of kind of like simply two countries have their competition to kind of like who will kind of like win the space race and things like that. Okay, yeah. But what if instead of they are kind of like competing each other, what if they are collaborating? What if like simply the NASA scientist and kind of like a Russian scientist are kind of like simply gather together and kind of like simply do something for humanity in the space race? Why not they did that thing? Why not they collaborate that particular stuff? And this is what kind of like a question is about. The question is actually about they, what if kind of like a simply human civilization, instead of competing each other, what if they are kind of like a collaborating, and they are kind of like a simply try to achieve a kind of like a something that bigger than this, like basically lead to the humanity to the kind of like a next level, so that they would kind of like achieve something far more bigger and better. Okay, yeah. Now basically it's just saying these space race and things like that, these are still exist. Okay, I'm not saying is this thing that it's not actually exist. It's actually exist. Okay, yeah. Every country are kind of like only wanted to be kind of like a became a first country in some sort of thing. Okay, yeah. I'm from India, and basically it's this thing. The India is became the third. No, I'm not really sure third or fourth country, but kind of like a simply third and fourth country is to kind of like a simply reach to the Mars orbiter. Okay, yeah. And we are successfully kind of like a did it that. We are became really proud that ki Indian space researcher kind of like did that thing, space scientist that did that thing. I'm really proud that thing. But what if those kind of like those kind of like some things that they achieve, if kind of like everyone collaborate that thing, it will be kind of like a much more better. Okay, yeah. Now space race is kind of like a bit more kind of like a difficult, okay, to understand. Let's just take a simple example. Okay, yeah. Example is this thing. Let's just say that ki a Chinese scientist kind of like a simply invent such a solar panel. They can kind of like a simply consume kind of like a simply heat and kind of like a produce so much amount of electricity. A conventional solar panel is kind of like a simply consume maybe 20%, but this solar panel it can consume it can kind of like a simply create almost like a 80%. Okay, yeah. Like 80% it can consume the it can 80% can generate the electricity from the solar panel, from the solar and things like that. Now this is kind of like new technology. Now can I ask this question that ki this is the kind of like a innovation is actually happened by the Chinese scientist. Okay, yeah. Can Chinese government will kind of like share this technology to the someone other country? Definitely not. Why? Because China is always kind of like a simply try to prevent his talent, and they will not kind of like simply share their technology to the other countries and things like that. Now why does, and basically the only China does that thing? No. Every country does that thing. India also does that thing. US is also does that thing too. Okay, yeah. But why? Why is that thing? Why does kind of like simply the new innovation are kind of like a restrict themselves or restrict in their country? Why not they are kind of like sharing that kind of like some information to the other country or to the rest of the global people, so that other people do the research and kind of like make that innovation even more better? Why not they do that thing? Why not they are kind of like sharing those technology? Is because of that ki we are human. Okay, yeah. Like basically I'm not talking about kind of like somebody Indian, Chinese, American or European or things or that. No, in the end we are human. Okay, yeah. Now let me tell you a perspective. What exactly is this thing? What I'm trying to tell you. Okay, yeah. Even if the government are kind of like decided to share that kind of like technology to other countries and things and that, still it will not gonna impact, it will not gonna kind of like feel that much impactful to the society. Now why is that thing? Why is that actually happened? Like why is that thing? Okay, yeah. It's okay, let me give you the kind of like a little bit perspective. Okay, yeah. Like basically since the human civilization are actually kind of like established, we are kind of like very vulnerable to kind of like simply living in this wilderness and things like that. Okay, yeah. So that's why we are kind of like living together. A kind of like when the one human are kind of like living with another human, his survival rate is kind of like became more higher, and that's why he was kind of like living together. Now multiple humans are kind of like living together, their kind of like a survival rate is even more become really higher. Now okay, and there is only one problem that they have is that they would kind of like find the food and kind of like a shelter to kind of like assembly for the kind of like a clan or things like that. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, because of kind of like because of this all those people we are kind of like living, we are kind of like assembly have more survival rate. So we are kind of like a bit more focus on kind of like assembly is this thing that key we must have kind of like a lot of emphasis towards our clan or our group or things like that. Like basically we are kind of like a focus on that key our group is kind of like something much more better, so that's why we are kind of like doing it that thing. Okay, that's why we are kind of like assembly that we should supposed to be stick together or kind of like do the thing together, वगैरह वगैरह वगैरह. Now, basically, is this thing, there are multiples of groups, there are multiples of human groups are actually established during that particular time. But the problem is that when the kind of like assembly, one group, two group are together, they are kind of like very difficult to merge with each other. Why is that? Why they kind of like difficult to merge? It's because of that. Let's just say, two people together, they can have a survival rate maybe kind of like a 10%. Okay, still 90% they might not survive. Now, three people are together, then there might be kind of like a survival rate is a 30%. Let's just say four people, 40%, five people, 50%, six people, 60%, seven people, 70%, eight people, 80%, 10 people, 100%. Okay, so do you get it? So basically, is this thing, till the 10 people gather together, their survival rate is became completely 100%. Okay, yeah. So basically, let me tell you one thing. They are only kind of like simply living together for survival. Now, basically, the 10 people are kind of like hard enough to kind of like they are surviving themselves much more better way. Okay, yeah. Now, if we add even more another person in our group, then probably it will become burden to us. Why? Because our survival game is kind of like a gone. Okay, like basically we are kind of like a surviving. We have almost like 100% efficiency regarding about our surviving game. Now, because of this, one extra person actually came. So problem is that that particular person also came with his problem too. Okay, yeah. Every person came with his problem too, and we have to solve this problem too. Okay, yeah. So that's why most of the kind of like assembly groups are kind of like assembly making sure that we have kind of like assembly sufficient amount of group so that we would kind of like assembly satisfy our need what we gather. Okay, yeah. And we shouldn't supposed to be kind of like assembly collecting more groups. We shouldn't supposed to be collect more groups so that it would kind of like make burden to us. Okay, yeah. So that's why kind of like some early civilization are kind of like creating groups, and they are kind of like not wanted to kind of like merge with different groups. Okay, yeah. Now basically this kind of like a group became kind of like something different throughout the kind of like assembly regional, throughout the kind of like assembly religious, throughout the kind of like assembly time and places and things and that. So that's why some of the groups are kind of like look very different. Some of the groups are kind of like live very differently, and some of the groups are kind of like a bit more differently. Now, because of our thoughts change, because of those groups are kind of like a bit more different than each other, they are not really kind of like accepting this thing. Okay, yeah. And they are kind of like simply creating its own bigger group. Okay, yeah. And we are kind of like make sure this is our group. Okay, yeah. And we are kind of like a bit really loyal to that particular group, and that particular group is became empire. Okay, that particular group is kind of like simply became empire. Now, basically is this thing, if the group is kind of like became more bigger, then probably is this thing, there are a little bit transactions actually happen regarding about their culture and civilization and things and that. But still the main core focus is about the loyalty regarding about our group. Okay, yeah, loyalty regarding about our group, that we gonna make sure that our group is kind of like only much more better in every perspective regarding about weapon, regarding about power, regarding about things. So that's why they are kind of like attacking other group so that they would become even more bigger, like even more powerful, even more things and that. So that's why war is actually happened. Okay, yeah. Now because of this, all those things, they are kind of like simply understand towards the loyalty and things like that. And from this war and things, the empire and then countries are actually established, and right now we are in this world. Okay, yeah. So basically we are in this particular world. I am bitterly proud of I am Indian. Okay, yeah. As well as also you are proud for your country too. If you are American, you are proud to American. If you are Chinese, you are proud to be Chinese. If you are kind of like a Sri Lankan, you are also proud to be Sri Lankan too. As well as like basically is this thing that I am a kind of like somebody in India. I am from Maharashtra. Okay, yeah. So basically, I am more proud in kind of like somebody in Maharashtra because I'm Marathi. Okay, yeah. As well as the people who were actually from South India, kind of like a Karnataka or things like that, he was kind of like became more proud for his state or things like that. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, even if we have bigger group, we also have kind of like a cluster of inside the groups too. Okay, so do you understand our human psychology, our human thought process is kind of like solely bounded towards our group. We're gonna make sure that our society is kind of like solely our first preference. What do you mean by that? It means that whatever I'm gonna do for everything, like basically whatever the best I could do, I'm gonna make sure that whatever the value that I get from me should supposed to be get the value from to my society first. Okay, to my group first. Okay, yeah. And when it kind of like assembly that everyone kind of like get all the values, and then I will kind of like simply share those value to the rest of the people and world and things like that. Because we are human and we are very loyal to the group. And this mentality is actually established since the beginning of the humankind. Okay, that's why even if the government decided to kind of like share the kind of like assembly the talent or share the kind of like assembly innovation to the rest of the world and things, and that we should supposed to collaborate and things like that, people might not do that thing. Okay, yeah, because we are kind of like assembly human, but it's not exactly right. We are kind of like stepping into the future, and we are also understand that we cannot achieve a goal or we cannot achieve some sort of target without doing collaboration. Okay, yeah. So that's why some of the kind of like assembly countries are doing collaboration. Some of the kind of like space research actually happened by the collaboration. Now there is a one product that I could that I could actually exist is because of collaboration, and that is called International Space Station. International Space Station is not just established by the US. No, it's kind of like done by the multiple countries, US, Russia, China. Every country who has kind of like a space agency, they actually put a little bit of collaboration into the International Space Station, and they built that International Space Station, which kind of like became something much more successful and things like that. Okay, yeah. So what I'm saying is this thing. Yes, we are kind of like bounded towards the humanity. We are kind of like a bit really loyal to the group because this thought process actually came inside from our ancestor and things like that. But when we are actually stepping to the future, we are kind of like taking some sort of step to kind of like collaborating and things and that. Okay, we might not share our technology to the rest of the people, but we might gonna share our technology to the such a people who are kind of like we could trust. Like basically is this thing, Japan is our kind of like a big friend of India. So basically is this thing, India and kind of like Japan is kind of like sharing the technology regarding about the bullet train and things and that, and they are kind of like launching the bullet train in India too. Okay, yeah. As well as kind of like sharing the technology with the kind of like US and things like that. They have kind of like a particular agreement regarding about this thing, and that's why they are kind of like sharing the technology. They are not kind of like sharing the technology to everyone. No, they are kind of like sharing the technology with a trusted group, and which is kind of like something much more better way. Now regarding about the question that you asked, that what if kind of like somebody human would kind of like somebody collaborate with this thing or kind of like share the technology with someone else, so kind of like things and that. Well, probably at some certain context it might happen, it might not gonna happen too, because as I mentioned, people are bitterly loyal to their group and clan and things like that, and that is somewhat true, by the way. Okay, example, if you still not really understand, I'm going to give you another example. Okay, who you are, what is exactly your age. Okay, if you are kind of like listening this thing, that means your age is almost like a more than 25. Obviously less than 25% might not gonna listen till this moment, definitely not. Okay, because if you are kind of like listening this, it really required kind of like a patience and kind of like simply understanding me and things like that. Okay, and this kind of like patience is established only and only after the age of 25. Means you are kind of like a bit really matured and understand regarding about how the world and things like that. So till now you are kind of like listening this thing, that means you are after the age of 25 person. Okay, understand? Okay, first of all, how many friends that you have? Might be 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, get it? Let's take example. Okay, I have my friends group too, and in my friends group I have a couple of people. Okay, but the problem is that at this moment we are not kind of like simply welcome another people to get inside our group. Like we do a lot of fun together, we are kind of like simply spending so much time and things. So by the way, we are kind of like a grown up, we are kind of like simply like away from each other and things like that. But once in a year we are kind of like simply spending time, we are kind of like making sure we are going to trip and things like that. And every time we are kind of like trying to do any kind of like trips or things like that, if the one person kind of like decided to invite someone else, then rest of people are not agree that thing. Why? because this is not okay, this is not the kind of like a thing. This is what, like, basically is this thing. If one of my friend is also kind of like a thing that, okay, dude, I have kind of like a somebody, my friend, like basically instead of his girlfriend, like basically if he actually invited his girlfriend, then that is okay, okay, girlfriend or wife, that is okay. But he was kind of like a decided that no, I'm gonna invited my kind of like another friend, then I would I would also gonna say that, dude, don't invite him, because it's our friends group, friend circle, and things like that. Now, why is actually happened? Why am I says this thing? Why? And basically, it also happened with you too. Because of that, after the age of 25, it's become really hard to make friends. Okay, yeah. We are actually making friends by kind of like a similar collaboration, and kind of like a similar this thing that ki, when we have kind of like a similar work or kind of like a things, then we are kind of like a become friends. But kind of like a similar is this thing that ki became a kind of like a similar inviting in our group is kind of like a similar bit more hard and things like that. Okay, because like we are pretty loyal to our group. Like whatever the group that you have, we are kind of like pretty loyal to group, and we are not kind of like somebody wanted a kind of like somebody any random person who kind of like somebody get inside our group and things like that. We don't want that thing, and this is what exactly is it. Okay, yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sometimes now I just kind of like feel that I was kind of like completely wrong. Okay, yeah. Like basically like basically is this thing na, ki when I was kind of like I always thought that ki what if kind of like some space race would kind of like somebody should supposed to be, it shouldn't supposed to be a space race, it should supposed to be kind of like somebody collaborative effort with every country would kind of like somebody put the effort regarding about the try to achieve a space and things like that, because space is a kind of like a very vast thing. Okay, yeah. And we shouldn't supposed to be kind of like somebody doing a race with someone else. We should supposed to be kind of like understand and learn and understand and learn about the space and things like that, because it's kind of like a something far more bigger than us. We can't even imagine how much kind of like a universe is actually much more bigger. Okay, yeah. So this is where it is. Okay, this is why kind of like a thought that what if each country, every country kind of like a collaborative effort and things like that. But still, yeah, like basically in this thing, some of the kind of like country are kind of like putting the collaborative effort regarding about the space. Okay, yeah. But this is only regarding about the space, but kind of like another thing they are not, like let's just say that let's just say regarding about the weapon. Now weapon technology has kind of like a bit more, yeah, bit more kind of like a secretive. Okay, and they are not wanted to kind of like share this technology to the any other country or things on that and that. Okay, so basically this thing, if the kind of like a competition is actually happened regarding about the foster collaboration or things is actually happened, then probably it would be kind of like something really much more better world that we are kind of like seeing. Okay, yeah. And I'm kind of like sensing that thing. Okay, yeah. Because of kind of like we are leading to a kind of like something much more better world. We understand that we cannot grow because we cannot grow kind of like alone. We have to be kind of like need a collaborative effort. Okay, yeah. And there are kind of like some sort of images that I could see. Okay, yeah. Like basically existing in some sort of event or some sort of kind of like somebody the global event, multiple people actually came together from Middle East to Asia to Africa to kind of like somebody European to South America to the North America. Every people gathered together and they're kind of like sharing their values and kind of like information to the global level, which is kind of like really good. Okay, yeah. And in the future we might kind of like somebody sharing some sort of information to the collaboration and things like that, which will definitely gonna happen, but with the legal procedure thing. Okay, yeah. Because of this thing that we might gonna share our technology or innovation or things or that with someone in another country, but still with kind of like a proper legal document and things and that. Okay, yeah. And it will gonna definitely gonna happen. Okay, yeah. Which is kind of like a really much better thing. Alright, yeah. Now I'm gonna ask question to you. If you kind of like invent some sort of thing in the future, okay, yeah, would you kind of like share those kind of like technology or share those kind of like innovation to the rest of the country? I will definitely, like basically this thing, I do have a plan to kind of like I'm recording this artifact. Okay, yeah. And I kind of like because of this artifact, it kind of like adds so much value to me, and I'm definitely gonna make an application regarding about this artifact, so that people will kind of like record the application, record their artifact, and kind of like do this thing. I already mentioned regarding about my application, and I do wanted to kind of like globalize my kind of like application to the rest of the world, because it kind of like add a value to the rest of the people and things like that. No, basically is this thing that my innovation is kind of like simply making an application so that I would supposed to be share and things like that. Like basically this thing, my innovation is not kind of like a things that I kind of like simply create a kind of like a solar panel who kind of like simply have efficiencies are almost like a twice than a normal solar panel. No, I don't really have that technology, but I'm kind of like a somebody have a technology regarding have a kind of like a, such a innovation that kind of like a simply lead to a better human or things like that. And I would definitely gonna share this technology, but share this kind of like innovation, but still there are a lot of effort to really required. Okay, because if I'm kind of like a believing that one thing is kind of like a much more better, it's very hard to convince other to how better is that thing. Still, it's kind of like a far more longer journey. We shouldn't still talk about that particular stuff. All right. So this is what my opinion regarding about this particular question. All right. This is it. Thank you.